Hello everybody, Pastor Steve here. Thank you for joining me today for our devotion and our reading plan. We're in the 19th chapter of John's Gospel. As always, I hope you've already read this chapter, prayed about it, meditated on it, and written in your journal what stood out to you, what you learned about God, about people, and what spoke to you and how you're going to apply it to your life. That's what we try to do every day when we read the Scripture. When I read John 19, I was intrigued by the power, the influence, if you will, of a moment in time, of a crowd, of emotions such as fear or anger, and how the power or influence of those things can at times cause us to make bad decisions, perhaps even ungodly decisions. For instance, in this chapter, we read about Pilate during Jesus' trial. And Pilate saw, as if you've read the chapter, you know this, saw no guilt in Jesus, no reason for him to be crucified, and actually on more than one occasion tried to talk the Jewish religious leaders out of their desire to have Jesus crucified. He tried to persuade them to not do that. And instead let Jesus live. But he ended up giving in to them and having Jesus crucified. But you begin to see what he really wanted in look at verse 4. Pilate came out again and said to them, to the religious leaders and the mob that was wanting Jesus crucified, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you so that you may know that I find no guilt in him." I don't see anything he's done wrong worthy of execution. Verse 6. So when the chief priest and the officers saw Jesus, this was after he was scourged and wearing the crown of thorns and so on, and Jesus is brought back out in front of them. When they saw him, they saw Jesus, they cried out, saying, "Crucify, crucify." Now that by itself is heartbreaking. Here they see this man who's been beaten within an inch of his life, bloodied, and there's kill him, kill him. I mean, talk about heartless. But anyway, after they cried out all of that in verse 6, Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him, for I find no guilt in him." So here's a second time Pilate says, there's no reason to kill this man. Then verse 12. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him, to release Jesus. But the Jews cried out, saying, "If you release this man, you are no friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar." So it's obvious Pilate wanted to find a way to release Jesus. Now, the truth is, he was the Roman governor of Judea. He had the authority. He didn't have to pay any attention to what they said. He could have released Jesus on his own, and he really wanted to. But when they started talking about Jesus claiming to be king of the Jews and therefore making himself to be a king, therefore in competition with Caesar, what they were saying is, Pilate, if you don't do what we want, we're going to create a problem for you. We're going to let the emperor over in Rome know that you're allowing this guy who claims to be a king run around. And the last thing Pilate wanted was that. The last thing he wanted was any kind of rebellion or insurrection or problem. And so Pilate gave in to the crowd and did what they wanted, had Jesus crucified. And then I think about these chief priests and the rulers, the officials, the leaders of the Jewish religious community who were demanding Jesus be crucified. And as you saw in the verses we read, shouting out loud, crying, "Crucify him, kill him." In verse 15, so they cried out, "Away with him, away with Jesus, away with him, crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Shall I crucify your king?" And to me, the next phrase is the saddest in this chapter. The chief priest answered, "We have no king but Caesar." We have no king but Caesar. That's the chief priest. That's the religious leaders of Judaism. Wow. The truth is, they despised the Romans. They did not like being a conquered people. And in their theology, only God was king. No man, only God. We have no king but Caesar. They compromised the integrity of their own faith to accomplish an end, namely to have Jesus crucified. Wow. Whenever a crowd, whenever groupthink causes us to act in an ungodly manner, whenever a crowd or groupthink causes us to support ungodly leaders, whenever our emotions, whatever they are, rule us, we are at risk of being like them. We are at risk of sin and really bad decisions. Be careful that you don't fall prey to groupthink and the emotions of the moment, because you might find yourself acting in an ungodly way. That's the word for today. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at chapter 20 and Jesus' resurrection.